So, hey, Braden, we're gonna make you a tenor. You're gonna sit way in the back on the right-hand side next to Marcus, who's actually a bass. There we go. And over there. Okay. Wait. No, that'll work. Let's do that. Let's do that, and then I'll put a bass over there. Hey, Haley, will you please sing alto? So there, take a magic wipe, and if you'll sit right in the middle back there. Michaela, what did you say you were gonna do? Are you alto okay with you? Well, that's what you do, isn't it? Yeah. So either the one right next to Haley in the back or the one right up front here. Got your, I thought it was already there.
Sweet and low. Nothing low. I don't remember either. It's been so long since I played it.
Nick, would you grab a wipe right there?
Yeah.
And come over here in the middle, and you'll be singing tenor with Brandon. Go back.
I just know like huge thing. The only thing I really
Hey, Ryan Bree, will you sit right there? Yeah. Singing alto. Over here, you're singing soprano. Yeah. Anywhere.
I ate a burrito this morning, so I ate a burrito. I know.
What were you on?
Well, actually, it was a church yard.
Finish this up earlier.
I know.
Hey, Emma, you can sit either at the chair there or the chair in front here, because you'll sing soprano.
Okay.
Maybe don't work today.
Stand.
What?
I'm gonna stand right there. Okay.
What about him?
There's no music on it.
Oh, okay.
Good job.
Yep.
Hey, Brian, when you get your wife, why don't you come over here and sit in the back by the organ back there, because you'll be singing bass with Marcus. And Veronica, would you shut that door, please, so that we have... Folks, as you can see by the time we're a little bit behind, I'd like to start this class at 8 from now on. Okay, so if you'll, I don't know how fast or how slow that is, but it's definitely at 8 o'clock. So, and I'll send that out to the rest of them, because you're all here. So, there you go. So, what we'll do, starting now, is for you to sit in approximately the places that you are, because I'm going to ask you to sing, take on the role of tenor, alto, bass, soprano. So, what I have the room set up now is, Garrett, you'll be sitting right over here on the end as a bass. And sopranos through altos, through tenors, through basses, which is a very common formation in choral, well, just in choral formation, going the opposite of the piano. So instead of, the bass, low bass here up to the treble, it's typical, if it's in a row like this, that the high parts are to the conductor's left, and the lowest parts are to the conductor's right, middle parts in the center of the choir. And though we're not talking specifically about formations right now, this is one of the standard ones. And usually that allows for block seating. So Kira, we're going to have you, what part are you going to be comfortable with singing, soprano, alto, tenor?
Probably alto.
Well, then there you are, right there. And then if you've got a very small choir, or even a large choir, you can invert the sections so that we put the basses in the center next to the sopranos, the altos on the edge, on this side, conductor's left, and the tenors on the edge. The reason for that is so that you can tune the chords a little bit more easily. So you have the bass next to the soprano, and so on. So these are two of the really basic formations. The other thing is that a room this size, if you've got a group about this size, or even another row in normal times, where we don't have to have 6 to 8 feet between you, there is room to curve the ensemble so that the sound, you know, so that they can hear a little bit better. As you would all imagine, the flatter the formation, the more difficult it is for the extreme sides to hear each other. And so this allows the tuning ends to hear each other as well, plus it keeps some of that sound in the middle for the middle parts. So that's the why of all of this. So I've given you two more pieces that you see there, and I'd like to use the three that we have now. Shoshone Love Song, you should have Song of the Sea, and we sing Gloria as well. And the issues today are going to be basically me introducing the two new songs to you all. Okay, and you're going to be a tenor, right there, please. So your tenor kind are actually the two guys behind you. So you three are tenors, you three are basses, you're alto, right? And alto right here in the middle, and the sopranos on the end. And we've already gone through some of the, you know, what's Shoshone Love Song about? We talked about, you know, what's the basic form. We went through the analysis sheet. We sang the melody. We sang the harmony. We know what the meter is and all of that stuff. And the three chapters, I guess, in the textbook that I'd like us to compare pretty specifically are these three. And these are the pages starting here, page 38 in the Gordon Payne text, page 98 in the Marvin text, or in the Marvin chapter, and 212 in the Jordan chapter. What do those all refer to? They refer to score prep and score marking. So every one of us has to come up with a system. And I will promote that, and that's what we'll do in here. And then you can take what you learn and throw it away if you want to later. But I've always found, and I think a lot of you have done this at various points in your life, learning by imitation is valuable. And you see what maybe works or what doesn't work. Maggie, you're going to be singing right here in the front as a soprano. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's really fine.
Okay, great. You don't want bass?
No, it's okay.
So let's start with a couple of systems that all of these men, in this case, promote, and that is numbering every measure. And I was really influenced in this way myself, and so it was something that I found to be a pain as a singer. And I see and hear some physical and oral groaning out there. Yeah. But what that does is, I think there's common sense about that process. And so just take out Song of the Sea. And many of these scores have been used already, so you may already have numbers. But if I want my choir to go to, let's go to page 6. Take out Song of the Sea and find page 6. And you see on the bottom system the third measure in on the bottom system. Do you see that one? Okay, that process took me a long time. And if I have to go through that every single measure reference, it's just gonna be a long process. That will add after about 1 hour, 10 minutes to your rehearsal. So it's so much easier if I can go, turn with me to page 9 and find measure 58. Let's start on the pick up to 59, and there we are. If your measures are numbered. If they're not, I have to go through the same thing. If half the choir is measured or numbered and half the choir isn't. But 58 is the last measure, top of page 9, and 59 is the next measure on the bottom system. So that process is just great discipline for the choir, and it will speed up the rehearsal process so much. There's also another system that you can superimpose over that. What would that be? Even if you have your measures numbered, and a lot of instrumentalists have scores that have this in it.
Rehearsal marking.
Yeah, rehearsal Yeah, letters. Rehearsal letters or numbers, right. I just wanted it more specific than markings. So lots of scores come with letters, and they will even, I remember when we've done Brahms Requiem and some of the huge works with orchestra, they'll start over again and do double A, double B, doubles, that's very common, or they'll do A1 or A2, just depends on the system. So that's another way, but in the choral setting, because you also want to keep the attention of your folks. That's another issue, is that in the 50 minutes that you have with people, a rehearsal killer is what I just started with. Page 7, does everybody see there where, well, some of you have oohs and some of you don't, but I'm really looking at this, that just causes some issues. So let's mark every number in this, or every measure with a number, starting from 1. And we all know that if it's less than half of a number, that is a pickup bar, and it is not numbered as 1. So rehearsal 1 will be on Song of the Sea, the first full bar. That pickup beat is not considered measure 1. This music, as you'll see, also has rehearsal letters. So how convenient. So we'll do that. And then I'd like you to also do the same thing. I don't know what shape your Shoshone love songs are in, but let's do that same thing. We'll number every measure. And this one does start with accompaniment, and it is a full bar. So that first bar is number 1, the choir. And in this case, this edition has what I like, and that is that every so often, the editor numbers the measure. Some editions, if there's not lots of measures measured per line, it'll be on the first measure of each system. And system is a word too, that when I went to school, when I went to graduate school, I'd never heard it before. My conductors even, the second line of music, they used to say. Now, system is pretty well taught everywhere. I think we teach it here, right? But I didn't hear about it until I was a master's student. And so you'll probably be teaching your students that word, because most of them won't be taking private lessons. Unless you've got a great, instrumental or vocal teacher in the area. Now, it's more likely that some of your instrumental students will, but the voice people won't. So they'll need to know some of those terms. But anyway, so Shoshone Love Song has the measure number starting there. And we sing Gloria. Let's look at real briefly the way, this is the Xerox, which I've marked for class use, by the way. So it is legal for me to copy if I use it for just class and no performance, which is what we'll do. I'm going to collect these at the end of the semester. So if you're interested in the piece later, you might want to write the information down. But anyway, we have, okay, that's the way that's scored. We have, fortunately, little circular rehearsal measure numbers. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, oh, lo and behold, they are measure numbers. This is really helpful for me because I regularly skip a number or add a number. And so when they're in the scores like this, it really helps me to figure that out. Okay, so that's step 1. As a conductor and as a teacher, we are going to need some help when we're presenting a lot of materials with everything that seems so basic. Like, what's the time signature? Well, what I do to this day is in every piece of music that I conduct from, I put a great big 3 at the beginning, or a great big 4. And I mean bigger than in pencil, so that I'm not going, oh, well, let's see what this is. As soon as I open my score, I see it, and I will do the same thing with the key. So what key is the piece in? And in the case of all of these pieces, you have two of them that have chord symbols, right? That's rare. A lot of the music that you purchase now is not gonna, I mean, if it's not pop music or jazz, or let's say it's a classical arrangement or a folk song arrangement, most of them will not have those chord symbols, so you'll have to do at least a modicum of evaluation in that way. So what is the overall key? Hark it back to our analysis sheets. So the very things that I'm asking you to look for in those analysis sheets is what I mark and suggest that you mark in your scores. So let's talk about, I made reference to this before, but in James Jordan's chapter, if you want to look at it, it's on page 213 actually. And he said, and I don't mean to just sit here and read all the textbook to you, which I won't do, but I want to highlight this one thing. The key to score marking is to establish consistent procedure for marking the score. That is, establish standard color codes for the most important aspects of the score. Below is a suggested color coding system, blah, blah, blah. So he circles all forte dynamics in red, and piano dynamics in green, mezzo forte dark green, light green highlighter, orange for enlarged, where there's meter changes, and on and on and on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And there's light green highlighter, dark green, and green. Yeah, well, I had a similar, and I always do whenever I read them, because I know in my score, if I have that many colors, for instance, in Cloudburst, where concert choir is working on Eric Whitacre's Cloudburst, which has, in some places, 15 choral parts, and multiple things are going on at the same time, I would have a score that was unreadable. And so I think the concept here is really good, great, but remember that we want to establish something. This is the part of it that you got to figure out for yourself. What can you get? How can you mark on your score? Make it as clear as possible to you about what's going on, rather than and I even have, because I have I got new glasses a couple of months ago, and they're graduated bifocals, and I'm not quite used to them yet, because the lens is smaller than the other one. So there's those little things in our lives like that. So if we're also adjusting, I'm just talking about the practical things of being able to read it. So here's a proposal, that you identify a couple of colors, and that they are consistent with every score that you mark. And of course, we're going to all do most of our markings and scores in pencil, because we typically want to be able to revisit those scores at a later time. I didn't bring it down now, but I have 2 or 3 scores that are both choral and instrumental. And in those, I get very systematic. And I'll just explain, I do use colors, but here's how I use them. You tell me if you think it's easier or harder than the system I just read you. For me, and again, you would have different feeling, but forte, mezzo forte, that seems red to me. I agree with him. So I circle some of my louder dynamics in red. Cool means soft to me. That's my thing. So blue to me means softer dynamics. Those are the only colors that I use. So the colors represent to me, immediately I can see a texture of dynamics in the score. I know exactly what I'm looking for. And then I might very rarely use a highlighter if there's something structurally really important. Let's say it's a brass group with choir and percussion, When everybody comes together, I might highlight that in a vertical way. So far, okay? So far, okay. So the system, I think we may have talked about this. I know we did in choral conducting, so forgive me for the repetition. But you can make use of this in any way you want. But I'd like you to develop a breathing system, meaning when your choir, when you ask your singers to take a breath, develop a shorthand so that you know exactly what kind of breath you want them to take. So there's a number of ways to do it. Here's one way that I have four main kinds of breaths. And I know immediately what every one of these means. And it isn't that you must do thy way, it's that for 30 years I've been conducting this way, and I don't have to guess. And so this is a lift without breath. I am alone. I didn't go, I am alone. I am alone. This is a breath in rhythm. I am alone. That means that if the note that I'm asking them to breathe after is a quarter note, I will ask them to write that note as an eighth and put an eighth rest in it. But I don't have to go through that every time because I know what that means. This is a full breath. I am really not. It has nothing to do with rhythmic. It's just, it comes to a stop. This is a caesura, and I only use this. I mean, this is universally known as a caesura. I only use this in a structure where maybe there's a rapid tempo, rhythm, etc., and everything just comes crashing to a halt. So, and then maybe there's a difference in section. So whether or not you see that much difference, I see incredible difference for myself. And it's not, does your language mean anything to me? It's, does your language mean something to you? And that's what I have a little trouble with, you know, I'll just say, with James Jordan's example, is because I think I would need a roadmap to figure out what he means by that. And rather than him just making a list of stuff, I'd like to see it in a score. I'd like to see, wow, what might that look like? And could I read it? So breaths, I'd like you to mark your breaths in these places. These have to be done in pencil, of course, because we're gonna do etudes and things like that where I might ask you to change your breath and conduct it a little bit differently. So far we've said measure numbers, we've said dynamics. So you don't have to mark them in colors, but we need to be aware of them. Dynamics in the score. And breaths. How are your singers going to have to deal with that breath? Because that issue you're going to spend a lot of time on with your choirs. Aren't we? I mean, those of you that sing for me, we talk about, and you don't even, I think you don't think about it as much, you just ask the question. Is that, do we make that an eighth note or not? So it's a big part of it. So then, score preparation, what else do you as a conductor want to know about your score imagine, let's play the imagination game. Besides, you know what key it's in, you know what meter you're conducting, you know where the breaths are, you know generally dynamic shapes. What other things? Yeah.
What part is most important in each section?
Yeah, that's a good answer. So if there's 4 parts, happening simultaneously, what might our attention be drawn to at that particular time? Yeah. What are some reasons that our attention might be drawn to one part rather than the others? And I'm just talking real basic stuff. In a 4-part texture, one of the parts does what? Yeah.
It can have a different rhythm.
Has a different rhythm. What else? It might be the melody, yes. What else?
The only moving part.
It's the only moving part. Yep. Or the other hand, it might be
The only not moving part.
yeah, the only sustaining part in a texture where there's polyphony or something. So if it presents some sort of contrast to what's going on, if it carries the melody stuff, if the dynamics in that particular, that's another thing. If there's an assertion of dynamics, then we're going to give attention to that one part. What's another thing we want to know as conductors? Yeah.
Places where you could foresee like intonation problems or
Yep.
rhythmic errors happening.
Yeah, and one of the places, or pretty much in any piece of music, where are a couple of places that we might, and I don't mean chromatics and, well, it's an augmented 6th chord and that theoretical stuff. I mean, what are some just basic structural areas in any piece of music that might cause some tuning issues?
Well, if we're moving from say like 2-part to 4-part.
Yep, yeah, that's right. When the balances change, when the parts start, if it's unison to parts, what else?
If you're going from parts to unison,
Yeah, or the other way, yeah. I'll just, yes.
Accidental.
Yeah, accidentals for sure. So anytime that something new is introduced to either the key center or the melodic, if it's a modal piece, that could make some things different. Just straight ahead cadences. Almost anytime you come to a cadence, what can happen? What are some things that can happen? I mean, yeah, the top of the Sears Tower can blow up, but I mean, what are some things that can happen with the music?
Either like plotting or sharpening in one of the parts that throws off the key.
Yeah, right there, we tend to have, just because things tend to settle with a choir particularly, we can have some pitch problems right at a cadence. There's that phenomena that when we're in a minor mode, we have the Louis de Picardy. We sometimes have that major third that it gets almost obligatory major third in a minor setting on the final cadence. And that's going to be a tuning issue. Voice leading. So it just really depends on, there's some composers and arrangers who are great voice leading people, and things just work a little bit because they move more by step than leaps and so on. And sometimes the voice leading will cause those problems. But now we're going a little bit deeper than I'm just thinking, basic stuff. And so all of the things that we're discussing are what we want to mark, anticipate, and think, oh, that part has an accidental layer. That's going to be, you can just anticipate that that's going to be an issue. I kid the altos all the time in choir because their parts are like that. They get to move in half step or something. But what is really critical is repeated patterns, and then they change one note. And that is going to be a setup for, that a conductor would probably go through and say, I'm going to anticipate that they might not all see that. And so, there are things that are much more sophisticated than that. Everything from something really simple to something really sophisticated. One thing I think you're going to find out, and you already have, as a singer, player, performer, sometimes it's the simplest things that can that we kind of forget. It's like me misnumbering my measures. It's like seeing a second and singing a third, or vice versa. It's not always, wow, that tritone, and then the first time they read it perfectly, and they miss the second on the third. So I guess the other thing is you and I have our scores all marked, and we're all prepared, and we go into rehearsal and we anticipate, and either none of that happens, so all this preparation's like, well, that was great, none of that stuff happened, or everything else we didn't anticipate happens, like they can't sing a major third, even after multiple repetitions, or they can't do that, or anything that's fairly even a level or so, a little bit more sophisticated, takes many repetitions. So point is that you're going to go in with your scores all marked to a rehearsal, and then you're going to go home and you're going to do it again. I mean, that is going to be the pattern. I do that. I go back and I think, wow, I didn't anticipate this, or this needs for me to work on it with the choir next time. And every group is different, right? Every group is different. You've been in that phenomenon both as a student and probably if you've led groups. They can be of pretty equal abilities, but wow, one group will just knock the socks off of one piece that the other group has a really hard time learning, and vice versa. So all that is the case. So let's look at, and the reason I'm kind of backtracking here is because I'd like us to have three pieces to go back and forth with that are very different from each other. And so let's take out And We Sing Gloria first. And so what you notice about this right out of the gates, I hope, is that it's scored completely differently than the other two pieces. There's a part 1 and a part 2. So this part is geared for what level would you think?
I would say middle school.
Yeah, probably middle school. Even maybe some advanced elementary, like a good 6th grade choir, certainly 7th grade. And I'm talking about kids that are somewhat experienced. It's not a piece that, oh gee, I'll bring out to my lowest level choir and expect them to read. But the other thing is, remember our piano keyboard thing, and that is, we're going to assume that for a tenor, let's say a high school tenor, C is going to be fairly low, right? C is going to be fairly low. For a high school soprano, it should be okay. For a high school alto, it should be okay. For a high school tenor, it should be okay, but fairly low. I just said bass is what I meant. High school bass, it should be fine. So, but everybody just sing. We're going to sing la, 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 and go. So, like some of you have to get used to in the choral analysis form, usually when it's a tenor part for changed voice, there's a little 8 underneath that treble clef. That means that the whole part is transposed down an octave. But I would use this piece for changed voices as well, because it also can work that way. If we think of part 2, or part 1 for that matter, as ABA down. So it just is an octave low, and it puts us in a very comfortable range, really, for everybody. So if I just, everybody do this. Keep a steady palm. The other hand. Yeah. So getting an activity-oriented thing before we even start looking at any of this might be helpful. Let's try this. Just repeat what I do. And we'll subdivide with the other hand at the same tempo. And say it. Da-ba, 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 da. 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 Da-ba, da-da-ba, da. Da-ba-da-da-ba-da. Do what I do. Da-ba-da-da-ba-da. Da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Da-ba-da-da-ba-da. So maybe I would do a little bit of that with them before I even started looking at that. And now I'm going to switch us to being adults, and we're going to go da 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 da. Just do that with the first three measures. 2, 3, go. Da 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 da. Good. Now we've set that up. The body accent, the kinesthetic accent, already will have us set up to do the written accent. So when I was talking, I think it's been so long since I had this conversation with you. When I said do and then define, that's kind of what I meant. So we invent some sort of etude or physical combination of something, and then we go to music. Then they already can do it. So back to, so we're going to read it, just those three measures on da, 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 da. We're going to go right up to scale. 1, 2, ready. Da, 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 go on, da, 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 do what I do, go, da, va, da, va, da, va, da, va. Now put a big, stretchy rubber band like we're a bungee and say, da, va, go. Yeah, so we get a little bit louder with each pull. Ready, again. Da, va, da, va. Now we'll go. Da, 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 da. Ready and go. Da, da, da. Yeah, do what I do. Ready and go. Da, 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 again. Da, da, yeah, and exactly what I did is what you will be doing. That is remind them to join you. And all I really had to do is say, just do what I do. Rather than address anything in particular. But do you see how much work that is? I mean, in terms of, it's a bit of a far cry from this. Is what I mean. So now let's sing the same thing, and I'd like you to carry on with those da 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 da. Ready and go. hopefully then, what I show them when I do conduct it is going to reinforce those things that I've set up. So let's do it another way. You please follow through with what I asked you to do, and here we go. Let's go feet flat on the floor, sitting up like junior high eager singers, and here we go again. Ready? Come on, get excited. Yeah, come on, folks. More. If you're watching me, my conducting had no relationship to what I was asking you to do. So that's the next follow through. Is we work hard to do whatever we need to do to set up the students, and then our conducting must reflect the weight, the articulation, the back and forth. So I mentioned to you Zola Jensen, who's at Idaho Falls High School. She's retiring this year, but I think you may remember that I said she doesn't play the piano, or she didn't play a note of the piano. She was a vocalist, and so this is the way that a lot of her rehearsals are going to this day. So she'll make references to the keyboard, and then they'll do a little bit more, and then they'll go back and do it again, and then she'll introduce the top of page 3, and then they'll string it together. And so, interesting. Just something to think about. But on that level, and if you've heard Zola's choirs over the years, they're really pretty fine. They sing, rather sophisticated literature, but she's one that her lack of piano skills, they're certainly better now than they were when she started, but it helped her actually to teach choirs that sing in tune. Actually helped her to teach because she's not constantly banging away. They're really listening. They're assessing intervals right out of the gate. So there's a lot of ways to approach everything. Would you take out Song of the Sea? I'll cut to the chase here. We're in the key of D major, as you can see in the so that's the 8-bar phrase. We're in 3. We have a pickup bar, and we have a long time arrangement. This arrangement was written long ago, but every new group of students seems to love the piece. I've used this myself with summer choirs, camp choirs. I used it a couple of years ago with a 6 group that sang, and they loved it. I mean, and one of the reasons I think is just it's a folk-like melody, and folk-like melodies are the kind that are just so singable. So let's just look at it. And so where the guys come in at letter A or measure 13, why don't you just conduct in 3, and it's in unison as we turn the page, and so everybody gets to sing, who's at least the scoring here is for the guys, but I would have everybody sing it. Because it's sort of like, okay, if I'm teaching, anything, name a folk song.
Danny Boy.
There you go. If I were teaching Danny Boy 4-part arrangement, I'd have everybody sing the melody. So here we go. Let's conduct this, and I'd like you to sing on do-do. Tempo. 1, 2, and do. Do. don't have to conduct if you don't want to. If you do, great. But I'd like you to sing that again, and I'm going to play the piano part with you. Let's change to la la. Same place, measure 13, letter A. La, 1 and 2, and go. Beautiful. It's just really something that simple structure. It's not a really sophisticated melody, and just about any voice part could sing it. Let's go on, and I'd like you to sing the top line now. This is kind of the refrain. And the la, go. Sorry. Now let's jump down to, you see where it says, this is one of those places that the conductor would bring out the tenors. Let's jump down to the tenor line and go. Soprano. Stay on the soprano. It's beautiful arrangement, I think. That part is like a chorale. It's harmonized. It's going to keep the melody. And then going on, if you look through it, the guys have an oud part against the melody, and the sopranos then carry that on, and then it's set guys against the gals in terms of counterpoint. So lots of variety in the piece. Everybody gets to sing, or at least the men, if that's the way you do it, gets to sing the melody. Then it's harmonized in a beautiful, simple chorale style, and then the arrangement kind of works through that. It's got kind of a funky final in terms of the form. It's a really unique form, and I'll show you that again next week. But so what I'd like you to do then is all three of these pieces. Let's make sure that our measures are numbered. Let's make sure that you know that, okay, I'm singing bass, tenor, alto, soprano in these arrangements. Because when you all get up to do some conducting, and it's not that all the notes have to be perfect, but I would rather us not be dealing with from scratch every single time. So there's a sound, there's an accurate sound coming from the choir, okay? And then these three authors, I'd like you to read the first, probably I gave you longer sort of numbers for each, but I'm just like about 4 pages, from 38 to about 41 or 42, from 98, same thing, from 212. James Jordan, I started, and I'm giving you the impression that maybe I don't think he's so great or something. He's fabulous. It's that one issue. It's the score marking that I chose to highlight, no pun intended, about kind of thinking that maybe it's an extreme. The rest of that chapter will provide us with some really wonderful, I guess, material to try out in class. So those 3 chapters, mainly now with rehearsal techniques, how do we use our score markings then to rehearse with the choir? The that thing, that's a setup for doing a warm-up, right? And maybe having the end of your warm-up session then go right into "And We Sing Gloria." So you could have them do the da 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 da, or a clapping rhythm or a moving rhythm, and then we go, all right, let's go to the first page, and then we sing Gloria, and then we try to. So rote teaching is fantastic. Call and response is fantastic, as long as it is put into musical context pretty quick. The problem with rote teaching is that in some programs, that's all that is done. They teach by rote, they pound out the part, and then they perform. What I'm saying is, we can use it to experience and then define, but it's the "and then define" that has to be done. So I want to be careful in how I'm leaving this today. Okay. All right. Thanks. Would you please